I just wanted to say that, I loved Matthew's talk so much, so I had to have a temporary disability. I have a lot on my mind about this talk, finding hope in times of uncertainty. And one might wonder, why talk about hope? Well, for me in my work and my own transformation over a period of over 60 years, hope is a driving force. No matter how difficult the situation has been, on a personal level, work level, political level, national level, or even a global level. If we do not have hope, then what's the point? I heard a lot of talk about hope today indirectly, and I'm going to talk about it very directly for the rest of my time. We live in a world filled with so many uncertainties on so many levels, and I could just spend a whole time talking about that, and that's pretty much what I did last year. So I'm not going to do that now. But the question really is, how do we find hope in our everyday and not so everyday lives? And unlike Gerd, who spoke earlier today, I believe we are doomed. I'm just going to say it. We're doomed. And our job, however, and this is thanks to my friend Mina, who is here today, our job is creating pockets of humanity. So think small communities of humanity. And that we can do no matter how doomed we are. And that is how we get through, and that's where we find hope. And then I just wanted to say, I was going to do a lot of talking, but let's just say everything Enrich Sahan said, Donut Economics Action Lab, okay? That's what I think and feel and believe in. So that made that really easy for me. We as humans, not designers, are responsible for guiding and facilitating reflected change for the good of our people, our companies, our communities, our nation, and our planet. That was the main point from last year, and it is impossible for one discipline to have all the answers. It is impossible that one model or one way of thinking will save us. We must harvest the collective intelligence of the different. And that's the only way we're going to solve the wicked problems we have today. And I don't think we will know whether we solve them in our lifetime. So it's not about finding the solution, it's about trying and assuming that we will not find the answers in our lifetime. We must dare to explore the room of possibility together, and we need to dare to try new methods and mix our ways of thinking. And that's where the real magic happens. In a transdisciplinary environment, we have to be equal, no matter what our disciplines are. And that means it means we have to remove our ego. I believe in the ripple effect. Like a drop of water reverberating on a surface, I believe we all have the possibility to impact our planet, our nations, our companies, our groups, our families and friends, and perhaps most importantly, ourselves, in a positive way, one person at a time. And that's something all of us can do. And I need to talk a little about social cohesion, because what we need to do is avoid social cohesion erosion, which the World Economic Forum has as the number 4 on the risk of humanity, towards humanity. The first 3 are environmental factors, climate change factors. But the first one that has to do with society is social cohesion erosion. And again, I could just talk about the 199 mass murders we've had in the United States this year alone. I could talk about the 53 shootings in Sweden this year alone. But there's so many things I could talk about. I could talk about fascism that is in every country and the growth of fascism. But the point is that we need to find hope, and the ways of impacting that is one person at a time. And from last year, I had the recommendation for us all to do a service design on ourselves before helping others. And this is still my number one recommendation for you. But I thought this year I would share how to do that. So how do we do this? And I want to do it at an individual level, a group level, a planetary level, or a global level. And then I want to come back and tell you my most beautiful story of hope at the end. So I hope that's okay with you. This is what we're going for. The most important tool I use every day, I learned in daycare center. Can you spot me? It tells a lot of my life. I put this picture in because last year at our dinner, I sat with a bunch of third culture kids, and I'm a third culture kid before they knew that there was no such word when I was growing up. So I had to do it on my own. And everyone knows kids want to make friends. So how did I do that? Every 2 years I moved from one Asian country to another, and my parents thought it was really cute to put a child into local schools. What I generally say is that the positive side of that is why I became an anthropologist, and the negative side of that is why I became a psychologist. But back to the point, I had to learn very early something to survive. It was a survival mechanism, and it's become my greatest asset. It's the superhero quality. It's my superpower. And that is, I learned very quickly, if I wanted to make friends with those kids, I had to understand them from their perspective and not my own. And I was trained in that every single day of my life. It was the most natural thing for me to do. And this is where reflexivity and introspection started for me, all the way back then. That picture, I'm 3 years old. So it's really all about perspective. And I want you guys to imagine, this is a little bit about what David was talking about in his talk, but imagine that every person in this picture is somebody from your organization, maybe even the customers there. And you're describing a challenge you're one of those people, and you're describing the challenge based on the mountain, the side of the mountain that you see. This is what happens in all organizations. We sit there and say, this is the easiest way up. And the other side is going, no, this is the easier way up. And the next person is going, no, this is the easiest way up. And someone in the room is always staring at the floor going, no, that's the easiest way up. And the problem is, that's where conflict happens. Because we each have our strong view based on our knowledge, our information, and insist that we're right. So that's why we need this helicopter view. This is why we need to be looking at these different perspectives at any given time and understanding that no one way is correct on its own. In any conflict, both sides are right, but only partially. So try to remember that. Now, to get there, to this way of looking at different perspectives, I teach a class on character strengths that has become the most important class. My students are telling me this is the most important class. And you can all take a survey by going to this website. And I am not a member of this website, but there's something you need to know about this particular survey on character strengths. Because it's unlike all the crap personality tests that you've had to take to get a job. Any of you had those? Yeah, just absolute bullshit. And the reason is, it's static. It was made often by men, and they were also designed from, like, one of them is IBM. They used IBM people in the 50s, men. And so if you in the red dress right here didn't pass their idea of what a good leader is, because you're a woman in a red dress, then you're not a good leader. That's the way those personality tests are. They're absolute crap. And I can say that because I actually learned how to make those things. But this one's very different because it operates under continuous peer review. It is not static. And for those who were with me last year, one of the most important things I talked about was we cannot be static in our ways of thinking and doing. We have to be dynamic. And this is the only survey that I know of that is continuously under peer review, and hundreds of scientists worldwide are using it and studying it, and it is thereby dynamic in nature. So what you see the first time you do it, in a year's time it might be slightly different, because the more data they get, the more information they're willing to make changes, because they want this to be a tool for us all. What you will learn is that we all have 24 character strengths, and we all have signature strengths, which I'll come back to, that are fundamental to our uniqueness. And we can learn to use any of these strengths, not just our signature strengths, any of those 24 strengths, to enhance our well-being and our relationships with others. We can learn to spot our own strengths, but we can learn to spot strengths in others. We're going to practice that in a minute. Our goal is to find balance in these strengths that we sometimes overuse. I'm known to overuse a couple of my strengths, or underuse, where we have the strength, but we don't use it enough, or we don't go for it when we should. So I thought I would share mine first, my signature strengths. So those are my ones that I do without thinking about. They're just there. And the way you can know what is your signature strength is you'll get your score on that, but you can test it, because you can imagine, close your eyes and imagine that you're not allowed to have that strength for a year. And when my top strength is appreciation of beauty and excellence, and I thought, what the hell does that mean, right? But I imagined not having beauty in nature. I imagined this, and I started crying because I understood that's what gets me through the hardest things in my life. The hardest things I've ever been through is because I have this crazy, uncanny way of finding something beautiful in it, even in the worst moments, which is why I want to share a very personal story at the end. But bravery, kindness, forgiveness, and curiosity. And the outer circle, just so that you know, are virtues that come all the way back from Socrates and others. But the point is, these have been well researched. And now I want you to just see that I'm not just smoking crack here. If there was one thing if I had a magic wand, this is what we would all be working on. This. And I wanted to see if you could try your ability to spot a character strength. And I need to tell you, this video is in Norwegian, and it involves a man and a woman. And if you don't speak Norwegian or understand, it doesn't matter. Read body language, listen to the tones, and you will figure it out. Okay? So let's try this and see how it goes.
For å behandle den saken på den måten som egentlig Høyesterett la opp til, fordi Høyesterett sier at det må fattes et nytt vedtak I saken. Det tar jeg til etterretning. Det kommer vi gjøre. Og hva som blir utfallet av et nytt vedtak, det kan ikke jeg si ennå før vi har et tilstrekkelig kunnskapsgrunnlag for det. Og så respekterer jeg at dere mener at nytt kunnskapsgrunnlag ikke gir noe nytt på bordet. Dere har hatt deres veldig klare valg I denne saken. Men jeg også har jo behov for å gi uttrykk for hva jeg faktisk må hente inn av opplysninger for å fatte et nytt vedtak. Som Høyesterett.
Nå har jeg behov for å skjerme mine medaksjonister som sitter her på 5. døgnet. Vi utslitt, og jeg tåler ikke at du sitter og prater den samme tompraten over oss som dere har holdt på med I 505 dager. Det tar slutt nå. Det tar slutt nå med en eneste gang.
Det ingen tomprat.
Vi kan ikke begynne å snakke om fremtiden før du anerkjenner fortiden, og før du anerkjenner det pågående menneskerettighetsbrudd som pågår akkurat akkurat nå. Det må ta slutt. Vi tåler ikke mer av det her. Det slutt nå. Nå det nok.
Nei, jeg har sagt veldig tydelig, jeg respekterer, og regjeringen respekterer urfolks rettigheter. Vi skal sørge for at
det gjør dere ikke.
It doesn't matter. There is enough. Her name is Ella Maria Hetta Isaksen. What were her character strengths that she showed here? You've got them here. Just shout them out. Bravery. Definitely bravery. What came before bravery? Possibly leadership, perseverance, I'm hearing. I have self-regulation. The fact that she knew to let that man speak and dig his own grave. That is a very, I don't have that one. You might maybe have figured out, I have that strength in me, because we all have that. But that's not one that I underutilize it. And her example of using it to wait, to the point where she says, enough, was beautiful. But you're right, leadership was there, perseverance, judgment, prudence, all of these. And this is what makes this woman be able to stand in the face of adversity in that moment. So that was an example I wanted you to see. But connected to it is my next thing. Mindfulness, because I teach that in the same course. We do mindfulness training. There are 2 mindfulness programs that have been researched scientifically. One is from Harvard, and this is from Harvard. This has just been opened, this Center for Research Approaches at Harvard, where John Kabat-Zinn, who's now an emeritus from actually Massachusetts Medical School, he devoted his career to stress reduction using mindfulness. The other program is the one that I'm affiliated with and is connected to character strengths. And it's Ryan Nemich who does this, where he has connected the power of these character strengths with mindfulness. And I wanted to talk about why that's important to us, because, again, there's a dynamic nature of character strengths. You can choose to pull up any of those 24 strengths. And I guarantee every single one of you is going to have a different score, a different way that it's going to come out on your survey. So you will look at your own and see how to utilize those. Connecting it to mindfulness, you can use mindfulness to help you find balance in your strengths, or, and this is so great, you can use your strengths to help you become more mindful. Doesn't matter. Both works. And this connects to something I've brought up last year, which is this, my favorite definition of mindfulness, because mindfulness and character strengths connect to Ben Shah's definition of integrity. The uniting of everything you do, your actions, your attitudes, how you behave, how you work, how you think, the knowledge and experiences you obtain, your set of ethics and values. These things are what I attempt to be reflexive on every single day. At this conference, I was working on it the whole time. I hope you were too. All of these things, they're so dynamic, ever-changing, because we're learning something new every single day. And we're not taught. Our schooling did not teach us how to reflect on this. So it's natural for us to become static. It's so sad. But you can turn this on and realize that, you know, what gets me up in the morning, besides the joy of my students, I really love my students. They inspire me, but it's the idea that they're teaching me something. It's not me teaching them. I learn something new every single day from my students, and it excites me. Truly excites me. The alternative to this reflexive behavior that I'm asking all of you to participate in, the alternative to that I think is far more serious. We form blinders with our expert hats. The more expert we become, the more narrow-minded we become, and I can't do it anymore because of the hand. So, where's my special Matthew thing here to be telescopic lens, We get more and more telescopic with that expert hat, and our egos get very strong here. But with more experience, the more expert we become, the more telescopic we become, and the more static we become. So I really invite you all to think about the joy of learning. And by the way, that is a character strength, the love of learning. So, that wasn't one of my highest, but it's there. So the summary of hope at an individual level, that's enough for the individual level. We can use our unique and individual strengths to facilitate change. We learn introspection and reflexivity, which is missing from the design field. We talk about how we analyze the others, but we don't analyze the impact of our just being in part of the change. We don't analyze our own roles in that and what we're doing, how we're impacting by just being there. And we're not looking, therefore, at our unconscious biases, which again refers to what has already been said today by David. We see our attitudes and actions vis-a-vis others and self-correct. We understand that suffering is just a moment in time and it will pass. And we understand that joy is just a moment in time and we need to learn to cherish those moments, really cherish them. So now I want to go to hope at a group level, or this might be the most interesting to you as a design because it's a method I use in service design, in all design, product design. It's about turning things upside down, and it's about positive deviance, which I'll explain in a moment. What about spotting the strengths and facilitating an organization's ability to do more of what we have spotted? What if instead of looking at all the problems, we go, whoa, that person over there is doing something kind of cool. Why don't we learn more about why they're doing that and they're successful at it? Why don't we do that? It puzzles me. So I'm going to give you the tools to do it. Because our most important solutions might be right in front of our noses, instead of going and talking to a couple of users and then going back home and analyzing our data and preparing for a new interview round. You guys all know who were here last year, you know what I think of that. So we don't have to go there again. But the point is, why can't we see that thing that's right in front of our noses? So I want to tell you a little bit about positive deviance. So it's a method that was discovered by Jerry and Monique Sternin. Jerry has passed away. Monique is still very involved with this. And what happened was, in the 70s in Vietnam, they were sent by Save the Children to go to Vietnam because 65% of the children were malnourished there. And the aim was to start a program for better information and to alleviate the malnourished children so there'll be less of them. And in the 70s, it wasn't so great to be an American and a French woman in Vietnam. So they did not get a heck of a lot of support, and people didn't want to talk to them. But what they could do is they could weigh babies. And sure enough, 65% of the babies were malnourished, but there were some that were not malnourished. The little green dots, that's very bad for accessibility, I am aware, but the ones that are on the black line or on the other side of it, those babies were not malnourished. So they began to get curious about those babies. And what they found out was that some mothers explained, these three, they explained that they had money from relatives living abroad, refugees that were living abroad that sent money back to the village, to these kids, so they had more food. They had more access to food and resources. That is not positive deviance, okay? So that's just an interesting factoid. They have more money, they can have more food for their babies. But these three? Same resources as everyone else, but they're babies. Their babies were not malnourished. Why? They started watching the mothers. What were the mothers doing differently? What were they doing? And it turns out, I would love to play the guessing game, but we don't have time, so I want to keep track of time. I much prefer when I involve you guys. It turns out the mothers weren't washing their rice before they cooked it. Turns out mothers who do not wash their rice have little bugs in the rice. And little bugs have protein. And little protein helps little babies not be malnourished. So what was even more powerful is these mothers could tell this to all the other mothers, and suddenly you have a situation where all babies can be healthy without anyone else coming into the picture. And that's what positive deviance is about. So let me give you the rules of it. You have to believe that in any situation, and in my 30-year career, I have seen this to be true. In any situation, there are individuals or groups of individuals with exactly the same resources as everyone else, but who have unusual practices and or behaviors that cause them to succeed better than others. You have to believe that. And then you have to go look for them. Their actions and attitudes are different, and everyone else can learn from them. And we know, as a fact, that we learn best from people just like ourselves. We don't like the consultants telling us stuff, right? It's really nice to be seen for what you're good at. And positive deviance can be used anywhere, public space, private space. I'm researching right now I don't even know how to say Nav in English, but it's our social welfare system in Norway, where they're using positive deviance to work, and we're doing the research on that. It's very, very exciting, and I'm also doing it in Washington, D.C. So I highly recommend it. You can do it in your local communities. You can do it in your own division. It's really great. And you guys will get the slides. I'll go through this really quick. But you have to have a clear problem. You need to search for the positive deviance instead of for the problem. Discover the unusual practices and behaviors and create a program based on them together with the positive deviance, because they know best. You don't. And evaluate and adjust and scale it. So, summary of hope in this idea of groups or doing a method like this is that you have to have a fundamental belief in the power from within the organizations, that the answers already are found there. A fundamental belief that we can spot actions and attitudes that make a difference. And a fundamental belief that we can be the drop of water and facilitate change from within. For ourselves, for the groups we work with, the organizations we work with, and the communities we work with. And now I want to hop to the next, which is hope for a global perspective. And I'd like to talk about the Future Library, which some of you may know, because it's about us being good ancestors and looking at the perspective beyond our own lives. So in about a week's time, you will see people walking in the woods within the city limits of Oslo, but it's in the woods, and it looks just like this. And where they're going is to a clearing. And this clearing is in the woods by Norway. It's called Nordmarka. And what's happened in this clearing is trees have been cut and trees have been planted. The trees that were cut were taken to our new library, and there was a silent room made out of the wood. And in it is a vault. And what is in the vault? That's kind of exciting. They are manuscripts by our time's most important authors. And considering the fact that I think we're in the middle of Handmaid's Tale, it's kind of nice to know that Margaret Atwood was the very first author who delivered a manuscript, which will not be published in her lifetime. It will be published in 100 years. And she delivered a manuscript, and every year, an internationally famous author since 2014 has been delivering a manuscript, a full book that will not be published in their lifetime. It's such a beautiful story. There's so much hope in this story. And they're willing to do this, to be part of it. And it will be for the generations to come 100 years from now. And these tiny little trees that you can go and see now, they're going to become the books. We're going to have books in 100 years. Beautiful books. Elements of hope here. The word future. Life beyond ourselves. Our connection to nature and being a part of nature. People in the future curious about people in the past. We can be good ancestors. This is proof of concept. We can be good ancestors. And now that I've shown you this, I want to give you my story of hope because it's about life and death. And there is so much hope and beauty in death. We need to design models for living and dying, tools for change and tools for solving challenges today. But most of all, we need to do this because we need to hold on to humanity. And humanity is just as much about being born and living as it is dying, because dying is a part of living. And we have separated this from our lives. It's something that happens over there. And I would like to share a different story. I want to tell you about my mother. My mother loves the writings of Seneca, a Roman philosopher and statesman. Her favorite quote is something she lived by, both figuratively and literally. So I'll give you each part of the quote. It's in 3 sections. The first, it's just as I shall select my ship when I'm about to go on a voyage. And we'll stop there because the rest is the whole part of the whole piece. When my mother was divorced, she took her sailboat to the west coast of the United States, and she lived on that boat for 5 years. And she was commander for the first time of her own life, her own boat and her own life. And then when she wanted to go on land, and as it says here, or my house when I proposed to take residence, she built her own house with her own 2 hands. She was 3 years older than I am now. And she built it her way, fighting established rules and regulations, and she succeeded. And so comes the third part. So I shall choose my own death when I am about to depart from life. And this is a story of my mother's courage in designing her own death, a story she has allowed me to share. But I need to tell you a little about who she was first. So my mother was an artist, and we both shared the joy of observing that thin line between the earth and water and the heavens in all landscapes. She wrote about it, she drew it, she painted it, she made jewelry, always showing that thin line. And we would travel together to look for it. And this is in Iceland, and I took her to Iceland the year before she died. And we were there having fun. And, of course, we found that thin line. And then we went to England, where we saw that thin line again. And this is my mom having a great time walking around. And I took her to Berlin because she wanted to see the Ishtar Gates. And one thing I didn't tell you about her is she was the most learned woman I'd ever met in my life. She read and she read and she read and she read. So she knew all about the Ishtar Gates. Just as when we were in England in this picture, she knew about every hedge and could tell me when the hedge was built, created by the plants in that hedge. And so she always had stories connecting the dots. And so she finally got to the Ishtar gates. And we didn't need a guide because she knew every single ceramic thing. And believe me, I grew up with a lot of ceramics and in museums, but this time I just let her do it. But we had another thing going for us. We love food. In our family, food is our language of love. And we would always be in situations where we would find this kind of food, and then she would talk to the cook and, carry on. This is happening every time we go to a restaurant. We end up becoming best friends with the cook. But we always reverse engineered what we ate. So what we do is we go home and we recreate it until we're happy. And we did that with gin and tonics. So this is a very important part of our story because that tonic became very important to her death. So anyway, this is the last Christmas with my mother. She loved Cards Against Humanity, particularly when she got a disgusting card. And this was taken, the last picture I have of her from Norway when we were up in Alta. But then everything changed on the 5th of May in 2018. I was supposed to travel on business, and I was drinking. I'd packed everything, getting ready to go to the airport, and I read an email, like we all do. Drink a cup of coffee, read the email. And in this email, it just said that my mother was in a hospital. That's all I knew. And she lived 13 hours from me in Seattle on an island. And what's so fascinating to me is within 3 hours, I was on that plane going to Seattle. And then I do stop and think about how much technology and infrastructure was in place that I could change everything. In 3 hours? Pretty damned amazing. But that's what I did. And then, of course, I didn't know where I was going because I hadn't thought about those things and I hadn't called the customer and so forth and so on. But luckily, there was internet on board. And I really understood what love was because I have a friend in Italy who was calling all the hospitals to see if they could find my mother. I didn't know if she was alive or dead. I just hopped on a plane. And I had another friend getting a car ready and another friend calling my customer. And all these people were doing this so that I could arrive in Seattle 15 hours later, which I did, and be on the way to a hospital. And so I came to this hospital, and it's 9 o'clock at night, so 18 hours after I had read the message about my mother. And the problem was the hospital was closed. So there was nobody in the reception. So I'm standing there going, what the hell do I do now? But then something happened. There was a cleaning woman there. And she comes up to me with this beautiful smile and she goes, "Can I help you?" And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know if my mother's alive. And she goes, "Let me just find out just a moment." And then she takes me 2 elevators down the hallway. We're going all over the place. And till she comes to a door she opens. And there's my mother. I was so happy at that moment. It lasted 5 seconds because my mother announced that she was dying and that she had gotten the diagnosis of terminal cancer. And this is where, in Norwegian, we call it yrkesskade. I have a work disability because I immediately go into service design modus. Immediately. That was my first reaction to my mother dying, telling me she's going to die, was that lady. That cleaning lady, was she an angel that just happened to be there? Was I lucky? Or was that part of a design? Was that part of the service? And I found out the next day, because behind every door is the no-pass zone. The hospital has one principle, and it is decidedly people-centric. Under the no-pass zone, it says, we never walk past a patient, visitor or rubbish without making contact. The principle is then divided into 3 points: patients, visitors, and rubbish. And if you look under visitors, there is the rubbish. Look, debris, pick it up. But what's so amazing is the one under visitors. Walk, don't point. That's exactly what she did. Eyes up, smile. That's what she did. Seek out those that appeared lost. That's what I was. It was so amazing to see this. And, I can't use this enough, Because if you think about it, this is probably the most important thing and why we screw up all the time. Because it's not about posting values on the wall. You have to have concrete understanding. You know, saying, oh, we have a company that believes in respect. Well, I guarantee a narcissist's view on respect and a neurotic's view on respect are two different things. So how do you get people to understand what is the behavior associated with that? And that's exactly what they do. So you need to be extremely clear and concrete about actions and attitudes. And this hospital was like that. For the 2 days my mother was there, she wanted to get the hell out of Dodge. So we got her home, and you think it's over? No. She starts directing us. And the first thing she says to me is, you need to get my coffin down. Coffin? What are you talking about? She goes, oh, I made a coffin. And I go, well, where is it? In my studio. So I go into a studio, on the ceiling is her coffin. This coffin has a dragon tail, and it is actually was the playhouse for my children, her grandchildren, that she repurposed. So she reused it and made it into a coffin that she wanted for herself. It had a telephone in it. We had to take that out. She wanted it because she just in case, but I had to call a funeral director. Can you imagine this call? Can you please come to my house and look at the coffin my mother has to make sure it's like kosher? Can we use this? Well, I want you to know that this funeral director now offers make your own coffin kits after this. He did look at it and say, no fucking shit. And then he took a picture. I said I wasn't going to say fuck this time. I just did. Mother's Day, I took her to her favorite place. This was very important to me. Then my children came, and just so that you know, we have pretty black humor in our family. Note what the cards say. Grandma's dead. It's malignant. That is my family. But then I thought maybe you would like to know how my mother felt about all of this. Would you like to know? She'll talk for herself.
Who said you can't have a good time when you're dying?
Wouldn't you like to die that way? I mean, geez. So anyway, she gave me a book to read. It was called The Tibetan Book of Living and Dying, and I read it to her, and I swear it was filled with her notes that she had. But that book was not for her, it was for me. It was so that I could be prepped. Then she had another thing. Oh, you have to go back into the studio. The coffin had to be by her bed, so she wanted to practice. And I'm serious. She wanted to practice. And then she had an urn. So she made her own urn. This urn, I ended up not, I like it too much. So I just sprinkled a little drop of her in it. So I did what she asked me to do. And then we practiced what she wanted, which is she wanted me to have my hand on her heart when it stopped beating. So we practiced that every day. That was something. And what she asked me to do was sing Hallelujah by Leonard Cohen as soon as her heart stopped, as loud as I could. So that happened. But before that happened on her last day, because my mother planned her death, my kids come in, and I hope some of you know Twin Peaks, because this isn't funny unless you know Twin Peaks. Okay, so my daughter comes in, and this is my mother's last laugh, because she said, this is literally like 1 minute before she takes her drink to die. She said, don't worry, Grandma Jan, Bob wasn't invited to your party. So then I made the gin and tonic. I made that tonic that is our tonic, and made the gin, and we mixed it. And it took her 13 minutes from when she took the drink with a smile on her face to her being in her coffin. We changed her. We dressed her. The most beautiful moment I have is when my daughters and I washed her and dressed her in her traveling clothes. That was by far the most beautiful moment, and I thought about it very much, that how few people get that honor, and how important it was in our grieving process. And it all starts with humbleness and gratitude. And I believe with all my heart that the answers we need are always found in our actions and our attitudes. And above all else, in our ability just to be kind. So I'd just like to end today on a very simple note. I ask you all to dare to be that drop of water when you leave this place today. Thank you.
Am I the only one? Oh. I think
Sorry, guys. It's a beautiful story filled with hope. So much hope.
And I have only one question. Do you feel you managed to say, let's go over there. Do
Yeah.
you feel you managed to say what you wanted to say, Anna?
I think so. I was really worried about the character strengths because I believe so strongly in them, and I see how important it is and how empowering my students are. And you know, I'm dealing with 20-year-old students who are really fucked up. And they're fucked up because of COVID. They're fucked up because the world's fucked up. And they tell me these stories and they talk about it. It's why they want to be designers. And to give them tools to be able to work with themselves and work with each other, it means so much to me. And I've seen them transform. I understand my own transformation and my own ability to use these strengths and mindfulness. And it's such a beautiful tool because it empowers us just to be and reminds us to be good humans. And that really bugs me that we don't do that enough. So I think it went okay.